A lot of time in South Africa, has been a real rugby journeyman, travelled the world, played for Wales, coaches his son's local football team, rugby team. So we're glad to have him here first day, and we're open to any questions.
Andy, how would you describe Rugby Australia's relationship with Rugby New Zealand?
I think it's very healthy. It's a good working relationship. I think we all saw last year there was what was an exceptional year, some challenges in getting things sorted out. But I know that Hamish and Rob had met with their counterparts in New Zealand, and it's important. It's an important alliance for Australia as it is for New Zealand, that we work together in this region and are both able to be successful.
How do you overcome those challenges, and how important is it that you do improve on their relationship?
Well, this whole game is about relationship. You know, it's about working together and sitting around the table. I think that's been one of the challenging things we've had over the last 12 months, is with not being able to get in a room all the time and sit down and have a face-to-face. A lot gets lost in interpretation over Zoom calls. So, you know, that's obviously critically important to continue to build those relationships, but at the same time, make sure that we're doing what's best for Australian rugby as well, and putting ourselves, you know, first and foremost in the best possible position in working with them.
And what will be top of your agenda when you speak with Mark Robertson?
Oh, you know, we've got to look at what are we going to do in the short term. You know, how are we going to get the Trans-Tasman competition up and running? You know, there's enough logistical challenges trying to do it within your own country, let alone trying to go across borders. So, you know, I think that's going to be our main priority, and then start really focusing on what does 2022 look like, you know, and how can we build rugby in the Australasian region over the next couple of years.
And Australian rugby's challenges have been, you know, well documented in recent years. What made you want to apply for this role?
I beg your pardon?
Australian rugby's had some challenges over the years. What made you want to apply for this role?
I just think it's the most fantastic and wonderful opportunity. You know, I've got a huge regard for Australian rugby, having competed against and worked alongside them for a long time. You know, and the fact that I'm here now, committed to this country, I really want to be part of a positive change in building rugby and taking it back up to the heights that it has been in the past.
What did you learn most about last year, and how you can use that to good effect this year?
Well, what I really learned a lot about last year was you just learn a lot about people and personalities, you know, and how they deal with pressure and how they deal with the stress that was thrust upon all of us. I think what we've found out from an Australian perspective, you know, through COVID, the forcing of them to play an internal competition, it's given a whole lot of young players an opportunity to step forward and put their hand up for future honours, and we saw that coming into the Tri-Nations that was played. It was fantastic to see a number of young debutants coming through, standing up, putting in some good performances, so it really bodes well for the future. And it's also given us an opportunity to have a lot more acute focus on developing and nurturing local talent, which is part of a bigger remit that I've got, to make sure that we start developing the game holistically from grassroots up, and creating correct and clear aspirational pathways for players from the junior levels right up into the high performance of the national side.
How do you do that, Andy? How do you get grassroots firing? What's new?
Well, we've got to put ourselves into the community, you know, and we've got to work alongside the clubs in all the different regions. You know, a lot of it, people always say it's only about funding. Well, funding is a component, but the other thing is about getting the resources that we do have at our disposal out into the community. For example, you know, when players aren't being used and aren't training in their day job, getting them out into schools, into clubs, and promoting and growing the game that way. So it's part of a much longer process that we're gonna have to start rolling out. It's not going to happen overnight, but through a positive commitment, engagement, and working with the clubs and the states, we certainly can start getting the ball rolling in that regard.
Andy, as you know, Australia's got an incredibly competitive sporting landscape. Where do you see rugby sitting in all the sports, the sporting landscape in Australia?
I see it sitting in a very prominent position, because it's one of the few in what you say is a very congested sporting landscape alongside cricket that's got a real global appeal. You know, and the fact that it can compete regularly on an international stage, it does participate in a Rugby World Cup, which arguably is bigger than than the Cricket World Cup and bigger than any other sort of major sporting event that comes out of this country. So I think it's got a very unique positioning within what is a very congested landscape. I think for share of voice and eye in the region, it's clear that it's not where it should be. But that's also directly linked to high performance and the performance of the teams and the attractiveness of the product that we're putting out on the park week in, week out, which is some of the things that we've really got to address. How do we make the game a lot more appealing to the fans, so we get that fan engagement element back in, and how do we get high performance winning teams that, when they're going into games, there's unpredictability and outcome, and people are intrigued to see the next matchup that's coming the following weekend.
What about domestically? Because arguably rugby has fallen well behind the two big football codes of Aussie rules and rugby league. Where do you see it sitting there?
Well, I think it's sitting behind them without a doubt, and that's a large part of that's been, it hasn't been as effective as probably it could have been in terms of getting into the community and growing the game through the grassroots and taking it out of what has always been very traditional enclaves of a rugby population and moving it out to the length and the breadth of the country, because there's no doubt that outside of the more populated areas, there's a dearth of talent sitting there. It's about getting into those communities and spreading the net a lot wider, and providing another opportunity. And I think that's the unique thing. We're part of a wonderful game, and the values of this game are something that really sets it apart in terms of international sport. And we don't sell those values, around determination, around honesty, around commitment, around hard work, around friendship and camaraderie. And these are very unique things to rugby that have formed catalysts to so many players all over the world. And through that and through growing the game across the region are some of the challenges we've really got to address to bridge that gap between what we're seeing in AFL and what we're seeing in the NRL.
Andy, rugby's had a problem over the past few years of losing players to rugby league. Why do you think it hasn't been as attractive to play rugby in Australia when you have got the prestige of World Cups and things on the international stage?
Because I really do believe it's because of the competitiveness within the domestic market. We are inherently tribal by nature, and we want to support and follow the team from our region, from our community. And if that team is strong and successful, you see it in NRL, you see it in the AFL. They have their ebbs and flows. When they got success, there's an influx of players wanting to go and play and be part of that setup. And so I think you go put the dial back to the late 90s, early 2000s, when the Australian teams were really dominant. The talent that was coming through the Aussie schoolboy system, they were all staying in the system. They weren't moving across into rugby league, and we had a number of rugby league prominent players coming across and wanting to play rugby union. So it's about getting the local product right. There's no doubt everyone understands once you've got that right, and then you've got a winning and a competitive Wallaby team. Players want to play where they're going to get trophies and they're going to be seen on the biggest stage, and rugby offers them that.
And how related is the performance of the Wallabies and the health of Australian rugby overall, and how critical is getting that team back up to scratch?
It's inextricably related. I mean, you can't be successful off the field if you're not successful on the field. So that's our biggest challenge, to improve our high performance and get a more competitive and a more winning team. That just makes the rest of the business, it makes the rest of the business a lot easier to manage and drive commercial value throughout. And also, we're wanting to get out and grow the game in the community. Well, people need heroes. People need aspirations. And we can only really achieve that if we've got a winning women's team and a winning 15s team and our winning 7s teams.
And he had much to do with Dave Rennie, and what were your impressions of what he did with the team last year?
I haven't had much to do with Dave. Obviously, I had contact with him when he was coaching at the Chiefs, and naturally had a couple of conversations with him since my appointment was made official late in December. Dave's is a very quiet and a very humble man. I think it's been well documented. He's got a big focus on the culture of the team and doing the simple things right. When I look at the performance of the team over the Tri-Nations, I think you've got to be realistic. It was a very unusual set of circumstances, in a coach coming in pretty late, a very disrupted domestic season, and then him having to sort of scramble everything together and get an international campaign underway. I think they made some really positive steps forward, and put in some good performances. I think you could see with the blending of the youth and the experience, we probably lacked that cutting edge to close games out when we could have closed them out. In saying that, there were some disruptions in key positions. But I'm a big believer in the game. You know, you're going to have a successful team, and you can go back right from, you know, the 1991 winning team, Wallaby team, to present day. If you haven't got a strong spine of your team and an experienced spine in your team, it makes it very difficult. And when you look at that, and by the spine I mean, you know, that's your number 2, your number 3, your number 5, your number 8, your number 9, your number 10, your number 15. And if you've got a strong spine that you can build the rest of the team around, then you're going to start seeing some positive gains. But if you look at the Wallaby team now, they're still developing the spine. And once they've got that, I think the rest is going to start into place.